Growing up, I had a lot of choices in regards to cartoon series, especially on a Saturday morning on what at the time were just 3 network television stations. But for me, the coolest were on UHF channels. While they look pretty dated and cheesy by today's standards, using stills from the comics with a minimum of animation, Marvel cartoons like Captain America were beyond awesome, delivering a drama and a sense of adventure a kid like me ate up that was a step up from the crap like the Super Friends. Of all the heroes represented at the time, the Hulk, Namor, Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America, it was the last but by no means least that was my favorite. Part of the reason, I think, was that there was a lot of romance going on in the other shows, and Cap was all about kicking the crap out of bad guys. And yet, I don't recall a lot of romance going on in Iron Man, but his villains just weren't as badass as Cap's, most notably the Red Skull. The Skull had a menace to him that guys like the Mandarin or Loki just couldn't match in my book. So while it's almost impossible to remember what 10-year-old me was thinking when he had a chance to buy any comic he wanted, I could guess that at the time when he saw the cover to Captain America 227, where Cap had to fight a legion of Red Skulls, that he just had to have it. Comics from 1978 were just a little different back then. First of all, look at that cover. Unlike a lot of comic covers these days, it actually gives you an idea of what to expect inside. The point was to sell the contents, not just to look pretty. For me, I must have been thinking, man, Cap is screwed, and that pirate at the bottom of the page ain't looking too good either. On the back of the comic, we've got another big difference, the ads. Back then, to defray the cost, comic companies sold ad space. There was a reason they only cost 35 cents, and this was one of them. Ah, Legos. I can still remember the cries of outrage as my dad tried walking across rooms barefoot and stepping on dozens of the little things. I can imagine how many times he regretted buying me my first set of them when I was in the hospital getting my tonsils out. And I'm not saying comics today don't have ads, but they are more for general audiences rather than keying in on a specific demographic, namely kids. Inside, it's another ad, this time for a Spider-Man action figure. Not a doll, an action figure. 13.5 inches tall. I sort of wish I had asked for one for Christmas. I could have played with it with my 4-inch tall Star Wars figures and imagined a giant Spider-Man stomping on stormtroopers. The top of the page gives a brief recap of Captain America's story, but I know reading that was too much like homework for me back then, so I skipped it. Besides, I knew all about Cap's origin from the cartoon. We've got well-armed Red Skulls, and at that time I thought one of them actually got away with swearing. I didn't care if there was a "ver" in front of it. I knew what he was saying. Cap is looking pretty worried as he stalks his way down the corridor and looks like his pirate friend has a name, Nick Fury. We then cut over to a totally bitchin' splash page as we see Cap wasn't fooled for a second. Now, apologies for the quality of the scan, but trust me, that's pretty much how the page is lined up. And something else I didn't mention was that unlike modern comics where the art is full bleed, you get up to a half-inch of space along the edge of the page. Again, there's a reason why comics only cost 35 cents. Over the page, and it's another ad! This time it's for the Micronauts. I was never into Micronauts. Ours was a Star Wars family. I don't deny, though, that the toys did look pretty cool. I mean, look at it. 7 different space vehicles that combine into a single battle cruiser. It's like what you got if you combine Legos and Star Wars together. Back to the action. Cap backhands a Skull right in the chiclets and sends him flying into his buddies. Then he ducks a blast and it looks like these guys shoot about as well as stormtroopers. Which, considering the term stormtrooper was adopted from the Third Reich, seems pretty appropriate now. The Skulls make fun of Cap's patriotism and dogpile on him, and that goes about as well as expected. Cap breaks away from the Skulls, and he mentions shield agents. I had no idea what a shield agent was. Did they have something to do with Cap's shield? Did his shield get its own agents? I didn't know or care, to be honest. We cut to a guy watching Cap on a monitor, and you know he's bad because he's wearing white gloves and using a cigarette holder. To a middle-class kid like me, those were sure signs he was rich and probably evil. You can also tell he's evil because he's monologuing to himself, going on about how much he hates Captain America. He talks about how many times Cap has beaten him, but he's sure that this time, it's going to be different, as he's about to make the big reveal to show what his ace in the hole is. And it's more ads! I can have an Atlas body in 7 days. Or real foreign money. There's lots of ads for stamps, and I can get UFO photos from government files. Over the next page, whoever is running these ads sure knew me. What kid wanted to be a police officer or a fireman or astronaut when they could be a draftsman. Ah, now we get the big reveal, which is Nick Fury the pirate. And if Nick showed up in those cartoons, I honestly don't remember. The ones I do remember were with the Red Skull using the Cosmic Cube and accidentally drowning himself, and the 3 robots that combined into a super-duper doomsday weapon. The guy is still talking to himself when we cut to a flashback where the bad guy explains what happened last issue. I don't know exactly who to give credit to, but a wise person once said every comic should be written like it's your first, that you should be able to enjoy it without having to read a bunch before it. That's not always possible, or even in some cases desirable, but it's a nice goal to shoot for. Here the writer, Roger McKenzie, fills in the blanks to help explain how Cap got into this mess, and while I don't know who Nick is, he's obviously Cap's friend because our hero goes all psycho killer on the Skulls for what they did to him. The Skull in green threatens to blow Nick's head off, and I can't wait to see what happens next. But we'll have to wait, because it's more ads! This time we've got Marvel trying to sell stuff. $7.95 for a single comic? That's like 100 comics. Over on the other page, we got an ad for the Sales Leadership Club, which in retrospect seems like some sort of child labor scheme as they try to get kids to sell Christmas cards to friends, relatives, and neighbors. But just look at the cool stuff you could earn. Cap knocks the gun out of the Skull's hand, and back then I wondered what 9 meant. Didn't I come before E? Cap tells Nick to make a run for it, but Nick proves you can't trust pirates and clocks Cap across the back of the head. Cap later comes to, and it's time for the Red Skull to explain his master plan, which involves what looks like a spaceship with his face on it that's going to turn the whole world into red skulls. Say, a plan where the bad guy turns everyone on the planet into duplicates of himself? Where did I see that before? Oh yeah, that Doctor Who two-parter, The End of Time. Marvel really is the house of ideas that people keep stealing from. The Skull tells Cap he's got the widget that will make everybody ugly like him, and he's got Fury tied up. If I was Cap, I'd leave Fury behind after he knocked him out, but Cap is good, and sometimes good means dumb, so you know he's going to save him. The Skull turns on some lasers, and it's ad time again. This time Doctor Doom is shilling for a Milk Duds contest. I actually didn't know who Doctor Doom was at the time because I never saw the old Fantastic Four cartoons, but if this guy liked Milk Duds, he couldn't be all bad. Over on the other page, we've got Marvel trying to sell you subscriptions. Notice how there's no women in the ad? Because Marvel knew its target audience. Boys rule, girls drool. Over on the next page, we have an ad for the Invaders, which in retrospect always sounded like the name of a supervillain team. And as a kid, I was kind of shocked Cap was playing second fiddle to, well, anybody. Then we cut to Spider-Man trying to get you to subscribe to something called Pizzazz. I didn't know what it was at the time, and honestly I didn't care. But for your information, Pizzazz was a magazine Marvel published targeting a young demographic that ran for just 16 issues back in the 70s. Thanks, Wikipedia. But back to the action as Cap evades the lasers and escapes, and we're back to the beginning of the story. Cap comes across a guard and looks like he's lost his shield, so the guy does the smart thing and takes a shot at him. But psych! Cap hid his shield under his shirt, and even then my 10-year-old self called bullshit on that. How does the shield even fit under his shirt? Why does Cap even bother? And what if the guy had decided to shoot Cap in the face? The door opens and the real Red Skull is seen having dinner, and the man can't be all bad, as he's even got Jell-O. He shows Cap that he has the widget that activates a satellite that will turn everybody into the equivalent of gingers on an Australian beach. We're about to get started for the big boss battle. But wait for it. We got more ads. These are actually more like the classifieds you'd find in a newspaper. Do they still have classified ads in newspapers? I haven't looked at a newspaper in months. Here we can learn to be conservationists. Draftsman or conservationist? I can't decide. Oh, now I can get my GED. Gain in inches and confidence. Successful weight gaining? Just do what I do and eat lots of king dogs. The next page over, we learn that we can learn both law enforcement and magic, and I wonder if this is where Jim Butcher got his idea for the Harry Dresden series. Oh, and we've got the amazing new Power Builder, which increases your strength, energy, vitality. Looking at this and the Charles Atlas ad from earlier, it's like Marvel knew its core audience consisted of out-of-shape nerds who wanted nothing more than to get strong so we could beat the shit out of the school bully who gave you a wedgie. Back to the action, and Cap throws his mighty shield. But psych! Turns out the Red Skull was goading Cap and catches the shield in a magnetic barrier. The Skull opens a door behind him, revealing Nick Fury is tied and helpless and is being cooked by a giant magnifying glass. And speaking as somebody who as a kid wiped out more than a few anthills with a magnifying glass, I could tell you I totally get the sense of danger here. Nick is screwed unless Cap does something, but he can't because the skull tells him if he makes one move to get the widget or tries to save his Cyclopean friend, he'll turn on the device. Nick starts screaming for help, and Cap is having a PTSD flashback as he remembers what happened to Bucky. And it's a really effective moment as the skull mocks Cap for not being able to save his friend then and not being able to save another friend now. And it looks like Captain America is going for a full mental breakdown. Over the page, and it's an oh, wait. It's the bullpen bulletins. I admit back then I didn't read the bulletins, but now it's utterly engrossing as it's a glimpse into history. We get Stan Lee talking about his take on the Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man television series, and he expresses some misgivings, but says he thinks the acting is first-rate. So he's a little critical of the shows, but expresses himself in a classy manner, as I expect Stan to do. He then shields the upcoming Fantastic Four cartoon series, which I think was the lame one with Herbie, as the PTA didn't want kids setting themselves on fire pretending to be the Human Torch. Then they talk about the epic 10-part story Jim Shooter wrote, which must be the Kree-Skrull War seen in Avengers. I've got that trade, by the way. And the big news that David Michelinie is the new writer on Iron Man, which would begin one of the most epic runs in that comic's history. Ernie Chan stopped by with inked pages of Conan and announces his wife has given birth to their daughter, Cleo Karen Chan. And hey, Dave Cockrum and Patty are getting married. They also announced issue 200 of Fantastic Four is on the way, and Bill Mantlo is penning Micronauts. Remember Micronauts from earlier? And, editor Mort Weisinger died. The following page has Thor fighting somebody over Hostess fruit pies, but on that sad note, I think we can skip it. It looks like Nick Fury is dead, and the Skull lets Captain America have his shield back as he mocks him, saying his spirit has been crushed. But Cap says the Skull made a big mistake, and he punches the Skull, who seems to want Cap to beat him up. But instead of kicking the crap out of the Skull, Cap takes the widget and blows up the satellite, saying he saw through his game all along and knew it was all a huge con job. The Skull couldn't turn the whole world into duplicates. The Skull explains he had to discredit Cap so that when he died there wouldn't be another replacement, and he slowly transforms into Nick Fury. Turns out the Red Skull hadn't been there at all, and Nick Fury getting cooked had been a robot that didn't sweat. And that's it. Captain America 227 is entertaining from start to finish, providing a wonderful story. The writing and artistic duo of Roger McKenzie and the legendary Sal Buscema gives us a non-stop action fest that also provides us with a touch of pathos as well. I'm not saying this comic revolutionized the industry, but it's nevertheless a fun read. Cap comes across as both stoic and heroic, and actually pretty intelligent, seeing right through his enemy's latest scheme. We don't see any of the tiresome monologues we get today where Cap questions himself, or America, or Americans, or bad guys delivering anti-American speeches that illustrate the political views of the writers. It's an old-school adventure that I wish we could see more of today. Based on the writing, the ads, and the bullpen, we could see that back then comics were meant for all ages to appreciate and enjoy. It makes me wonder who some editors and writers think comics are meant for today. Anyway, if you enjoyed the recap, please hit like, share it with your friends, and subscribe. See you next time.